So we are at our session number 7 and we are having a continuation of what we saw last time, Samkhya Vaisheshika. And if you remember last time we saw this topic on the 3 modes of nature, right, psychology. So does everyone remember the title of the 3 modes? What were the modes that we spoke of? Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Very good. So the first one was, in English, thoughtfulness, goodness. Second was passion with aggression. And third was insanity and ignorance. Right? So this is what we had done last time. So we're going to look at some application of this. So that is, how was this psychology, which the philosophy talks of here, applied in society? So basically from philosophy we went to psychology, we are going to sociology, because they are all connected in some way. Right? So that is actually the theme. So of course you remember this slide. So this was again one of the last slides that I had concluded with last time, where I told you that the 3 gunas which are there, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, they are graded on each of these points: outlook, motive, mentality, so on and so forth. Right? We had seen this in great detail last time. I'll not go into that again. Yeah, so basically this is again an important point. So goodness basically means detached, dispassionate, interested in knowledge for its own sake. So that means one characteristics of Sattva is one is interested in the knowledge, whatever he is obtaining, because the knowledge is important. You understood? That means knowledge for the sake of knowledge. Whereas in passion it's for some desire. Simple example, are you here in engineering because you really like engineering itself, or is it because you are here to make money and thinking that isse paisa milega, this is the only profession left? You understood what I'm saying, right? When it is like that, I mean, each of you will have to ask that question to yourself. Why you came here, why you came to a particular field, why you took a particular job in life. Like for example, teacher. There are so many people I know who take the job of a teacher because they never got any company job. That's not reason to be a teacher. That's not the reason at all to be a teacher. Because you didn't get a job in a company, you thought that I would rather teach. That's the last thing. So basically, is it primarily for that object itself, or is it because of something else? That basically decides the mode in which you are working. You understood? Then that has all kinds of repercussions. So ignorance basically means apathy, indifference, obliviousness, bewilderment. So basically here there is total confusion only. One is not clear only as to why he came. At least the passionate guy is clear that he came to a job or a profession for money. This fellow is not even clear. He is completely lost. Right? So this is what we did. Even consciousness. Consciousness means, right? We all know what consciousness means. Consciousness is in terms of thinking, feeling, willing. So in goodness it's alert, attentive, and at the same time detached and disinterested. Now this is very interesting because apparently there is a contradiction here. Disinterested does not mean that it is in the sense of being detached, in the sense of okay fine, everything is, I'll take any situation the way it comes in life. In that sense disinterested, not disinterested in the sense that one just doesn't want to do it. Whereas here it's narrowly focused on the object of desire, and in ignorance it's inattentive, distracted, and misperception is very common here, chronic misperception. So anyway, now so basically I'm only dealing with 2 applications of the 3 modes today. We're just looking at exactly 2 applications of it. And the first one is what we will call as Varna. And this is a very, very hugely debated word and very controversial, and has too many things related to it in our modern society as well. So Varna generally means what? Everybody knows what does Varna mean in Sanskrit? Of course, Varna literally means color, but what it is actually used for? What is the modern understanding of Varna? What is the British definition of Varna? Caste. What we know as castes are related to Varna. And it's an extremely huge topic in India today. If you see, our entire Indian society is conducted so much around this, right? Just like 2 days back you had a huge Maratha rally, right? So it was related to Varna only, to the group of people who identify themselves with that particular group, right? So that's how it is. So don't you agree that our Indian society today is in so many ways working in the sense of Varna, right? Varna basically decides and, right? Yeah, so actually what is Varna? So we will just go into it a little bit. So as most of you said, Varna actually literally means color. That's what it actually means. And another synonym for this is actually Jati. It is slightly different from this word caste. The reason is Varna and Jati. The whole question is what has been it based upon? That means who decides or what decides who will be in a particular Varna or Jati. If you ask this question, the answer from the, at least from the Sankhya, the Indian philosophy perspective is that it is Guna Karma. That means it is quality and work. So we'll elaborate on that a little bit. This Guna means what we studied right now. This psychology. Quality and work. Work means the kind of activity that you do. I'll be elaborating on this today to a great detail. That how Guna and Karma, actually the word used in the Indian philosophy is Karma. Karma means either activity or work in English language. So, right? Activity or work is the actual deciding factor for a particular caste, for a jati, and not birth. So, birth which is there as such, it was one of the criteria, not that it was never. But I want to reason out today and explain to you that basically this was secondary. Primarily it was quality and work. What kind of quality you have and what kind of work you wish to do in the world. That decided the Varna. So this basically comes from the Gita's one verse where Krishna explains Chaturvaranyam maya srishtam guna karma vibhagashaha. I mean the Chaturvaranyam, these four Varnas of what is popularly known as Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra is based on Guna and Karma Krishna speaks of. Because that's the original philosophy and thought process. Now how was it in India? So today actually we are going into a lot of history and we will see. So basically just as a human body is equipped by nature with, so the whole concept of this Varnas is to help cooperation. In fact in today's India, unfortunately, the whole Varna has become competition. You understand what I'm saying? Everything is basically competitive. Everybody is wanting to fight and push the other people down. I mean, you hear throughout India stories of honor killing and, of people fighting for reservations, and that's happening everywhere actually. It's not just in Maharashtra that the rally happened. In Gujarat, some months ago, there were the Patels who were agitating. Some months before in Haryana, there was the Jat agitation, which was very severe actually. If you read in the news of what happened actually. Right? So unfortunately in today's India, what has happened? This whole Jati has become from the perspective of cooperation or competition? Competition. The whole thing is competition. And I wish to make this point today, which perhaps if I get time I will elaborate, that one of the main culprits for this, does anybody know who's the main culprit to make these castes, make India in general internally so divisive? The British. Of course the British, no one else. All credit goes to the British. Because if you see carefully, I'll explain why I'm saying that. It's not just a statement that I'm making. Because the whole British policy where they ruled us for 250 years was divide and rule. And unfortunately, even though we are independent in India today, our politicians continue the same policies. Because of which you see that, like you see in every election in India, it's all based on what? Caste bank politics. You heard this term? Yes. Now Uttar Pradesh election is coming. The whole thing is that, Mayawati captures the Dalits and some other thing. Samajwadi party captures the Yadavs. And you understand? So different parties are vying for different caste groups. So that is why it has become competitive and not cooperation. But the purpose of the Varna system is actually cooperation. And explain why it is like that. So just as the human body is equipped with head, arms, belly and legs. If you see, all these things are important, right? You need hands, you need legs, you need a head, you need a belly. And you need cooperation among them also. If every organ says that no, I'm not going to cooperate with others, it doesn't work. Even if you have the brilliant head, you need hands and legs to work. Similarly, there are 4 occupational groups. This is actually the translation of the word jati. Now please remember the British, so the thing is, the Indian caste system which is there, which is called as jati or varna, is very different from the European system. If any of you have read European history, the medieval history for almost 18th centuries, how it was based, the Europe also had a very similar system. If you know, there were all these, the kings, and under the kings were the lords and the knights. You heard this term? Lords. Lords means something like those who had a lot of land. They were called as lords. And that's why you have the Lord's Stadium in London. Cricket stadium in a Lord's. That is called Lords because all the lords and the ladies means their wives, they would come to watch match. That's why that stadium is called as Lord's Stadium. And by the way cricket started is it started as betting. So all these lords would come, there would be 2 teams playing and all the people would bet who will win. It was like a horse betting. So now we are saying cricket mein betting hai, acha nahi hai, this, that. But interestingly, the genesis of cricket was gambling and betting. Just like the genesis of cricket was lost. Anyway, so the lords had and below them were what is called as the vassals or the villains. This villain word which we have in Hindi movie where we say villain, originally in English language it means somebody who lives in a village, somebody who is a farmer. And below them were the serfs or slaves. And above this guy was the priest, the bishop, etc. And on top of everybody was a pope. Do you know by and large that Europe ran like this only for 18th centuries? From the time of Christ till this broke down somewhere during the French Revolution, end of the 18th century, all this started crumbling down. So this looks like the Indian system, but it is totally different. The difference is this whole system in Europe was based on, what was this system called? Anybody knows in English what was the name of the system? The system was called as a feudal system. Have you heard the name feudal system? Feudal system. Does anyone know what is the meaning of the word feudal? From where does this word feudal come? Feudal comes from the word fealty, which in Latin means loyalty. That means this system was a system of loyalty. These people had to be completely loyal to them. Completely loyal and completely loyal. Nobody had independence, remember. You understood? That means, for example, the serfs. So, suppose if they had a land and some serfs were working on a land, when the knight would sell the land, the serfs would get sold along with the land. They were like trees on the land. You get it? And even the lords were not free. If they disobeyed the king, then there was a fight. If the king went against the pope would call another king to fight against him. You understood? But the Indian system was completely different. The reason why it was completely different was in the Indian system, one of the most important things that was emphasized was independence. That means if you see the Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra concept in India, it was not exactly hierarchical as in everybody had to literally report to the other person. It was nothing like that. Everyone was independent. Independence is something that is emphasized. That's why India is said to be the only country which has never had slavery. Understood? We never had trading of slaves, buying and selling human beings. Even with the people of the so-called, lower caste background, no one was ever brought and sold. ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं हुआ. It's only thing the British when they came here, they saw that you also have a system which can be exploited, which they use to their advantage. I'll come back to this point later. But the Indian system, the 4 occupational groups, as I'm calling it, was like this. The Brahmins, their main job, if you see, that means from the karma perspective, their activity was what? Being a thinker and a teacher. That's actually the work of a Brahmin. If he's that, then he's a Brahmin, otherwise he's not. It's very clear. I'll substantiate my point with examples. The Kshatriya was basically the governor, protector, the ruler, right? The Vaishyas were the producers and the traders, the Shudras was workers and assistants. Now in this whole system, it was mandatory that the Brahmins, the Kshatriya and Vaishya are all independent people. You understand what is independent? They were all independent. Independent as in they did not have a boss whom they had to necessarily report to or listen to someone. And that's why, for example, in Marathi also there is one saying actually that Sheti Uttam, Vyavasaya Madhyam, Naukri Adam. I don't know whether some of you have heard that, but in Marathi basically what it means is the whole idea is to promote independence. That means the idea of having a boss and working under somebody was considered the lowest in that category. I mean, I just want to make a mention to all of you as well, that even though all of you are doing engineering, if in some way you could find a profession where you are independent, you would do a great good for yourself, rather than having to kind of listen to some boss and just wag your tail as per his needs and his demands. Because independence is a very important thing that is stressed here. Okay, now let's go more into each of this. Okay, so the Brahmins basically, as I told you, their function, that means from terms of karma, was priest, teacher, advisor. This was the main work. And the qualities, they are supposed to have quality as well. And the quality mainly is the quality of goodness. That means the sattva which is there, that has to be there in the system. If that is there in the system, one is accepted like that. If that is not there in the system, one is not accepted as a Brahman. So I will give examples to substantiate what I am saying. Okay, first I will put this up and then I will go into each of it. Similarly, the Kshatriyas had a role, function, martial, administrator, etc. They had qualities, heroism, power, determination, courage. And similarly, they had a predominant mode. Now what you are seeing over here is also, previously when I told about Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, perhaps everybody felt that only Sattva is good, other two are not good. It is not like that. Even Rajas and Tamas has its positive application. You understood? Because, like if you see for example Maharashtra history, if you see the history of Shivaji and his times, if you see the way these people actually fought, it requires a lot of aggression and passion, right? If you read about Shivaji's life and the life of all his, great associates, Tanaji and all these guys, they actually had a lot of courage in their system. And that is actually passion being cultivated positively. You understood? That means the passion has been given a positive passion, basically passion that gives a positive contribution to society. That's what it means. So that means that Rajogun is not condemned. That is there. You can't change it overnight. But even if it is there, it can be actually kind of like if you see for example, I was reading, like even if you see recent Indian history, like in 1999 when the Kargil war was there, if you know how the Indians actually won the Kargil post, some of you must have read the story, but the story is that the Sikh regiment which is there, somewhere at midnight, 2 o'clock or something, they started climbing up the hill. You understood? In order to enter Kargil and take the enemy by surprise. And they started shooting actually at 3 AM in the morning. They went in like that. Now please try to understand, for anybody to do such a task, you need a lot of courage. Even though today we have weapons and all, if you have to actually cross the border and fight, you need guts. You can't be a coward to do this. So uske liye passion chahiye. So this is a very positive engagement of passion. You understand that? So that's what Kshatriya meant. Kshatriya did not mean anything else. So I'll take some more examples of it. So similarly, even the Vaishya, so he had his job, mercantile class, farmers, merchants, etc. And he had a job as well. I'll elaborate on this very soon. And his mode was again passion and ignorance. Why ignorance over here, Tamas? Because his main business is to make money. That means Vaishya means somebody who thinks, kaisa aur paisa banega, how to make more money. And that is generally not a very idealistic thought process. But some people are required like that as well, otherwise society will not function. If everybody is a philosopher like Socrates sitting and thinking, very difficult, nothing will happen. And similarly, the Shudras also had their functions, mainly labor class, working for somebody, labor and service, and that's the characteristic. Now, only on this slide I will be speaking. So basically, through this slide, what I want to tell you in short is that the Varna system of India was basically an application of the modes of nature, and it was a very positive application, because what it did, it helped people to identify their role in society. Now I'll take some examples and also talk about cooperation, since I mentioned about it. Just like, for example, if you see, let's take in Indian history, in Indian modern history, which is recorded, like if you take Chanakya, if you begin from Chanakya's times, if you see, Chanakya was what? He was a minister to this Chandragupta Maurya, correct? We all know the Indian history. He was a minister of Chandragupta Maurya. And this guy, he was completely independent. Though he was a minister, if you see Chanakya's story, it says that Chandragupta Maurya, when he offered a salary to Chanakya, Chanakya said, I don't want salary. Because if I take salary from you, I'll be obliged to dance according to your tune. I will take charity. Charity means dhan. Whatever you want to give me, you give me. I will work on that. And you can't question my actions. I will tell you advice freely. That means, whatever I feel, I will tell you honestly. You understood? Because Chanakya's viewpoint was, if I take salary from Chandragupta, then in order to protect my good salary, I have to necessarily say things to unnecessarily usko chadane ke liye, not just to glorify him, which I don't want to do. You get this? So the whole concept was of what? Cooperation. Cooperation. It was not of competition. Okay, like so, and that cooperation was again voluntarily. And just like, so we'll take one example of where the cooperation failed in some sense, or where somebody. Now, how many of you know that India first lost its freedom, to the foreign rule? Which king actually lost Delhi for the first time? Do you know that? Who lost Delhi for the first time in Indian history in the last 1,000 years? None of you know history? You have only been studying physics, chemistry and mathematics to become engineer. Have you heard of this guy called Prithviraj Chauhan? Yeah, he was the person. So this guy ruled over India in the 11th century, and when he was ruling over Delhi, there was this Muhammad Ghori who had attacked. So Prithviraj Chauhan defeated Muhammad Ghori, caught him alive. So he had a minister. His ministers were Brahmins at that time. They told him, kill him, because he's a snake. A snake is not to be kept alive. Snake is immediately to be, it's a wild snake. It's more dangerous than a snake. Kill this fellow. Of course, Prithviraj Chauhan did not, he said that I will forgive him. Non-violence. He forgave. Was the forgiveness of any use? Next year, Muhammad Ghori attacks again. This time he comes with a 1 lakh strong army. He defeats Prithviraj Chauhan. He takes him alive. And he tells him that I will not do the mistake that you did to me. I will pluck your eyes and kill you. And that's what he did. He killed him by plucking his eyes out. You get this point? So the thing is, that means the whole point was, the system was such that these guys, can they fight? They cannot. They will be like Chanakya. They will be giving advice. Who is supposed to fight? This fellow. He is supposed to take the decisions. Now as he is taking decisions, he needs people to give him advice. And that advice he may take or he may not take. The Indian system was always free. You may take or not take. Because it was not like this, that if you don't obey, you are finished, you are out. ऐसा नहीं है. ठीक है, नहीं सुना तो मत सुनो. This is our advice to you. Kill him. He chose not to kill. You get it? But again, it is not that always the Brahmins gave the right advice. Sometimes they didn't. And the Kshatriya would take the right decision. Now, if you've seen Shivaji's life, there is a story. So Shivaji he had this Pradhan, this Ashtapradhan he had these ministers who were Brahmins who were advising him on various affairs. Shivaji had a general whose name was Netaji. His full name is Netaji Palkar. So this guy was captured by the Aurangzeb in some war, and Aurangzeb told Netaji that as he would do, either you convert to my religion or I kill you. Now there are many people in Indian history whom we know, like the Sikhs and all, who decided to die. right? But everybody cannot take such a decision. Netaji said, I'll convert. मेरे को माफ करो. So Aurangzeb said, no problem. He converted him to his religion. He gave him a new name and he sent him to Afghanistan to fight a war on his behalf. So Netaji, when he went to Afghanistan, he felt that I want to go back to Shivaji. You understood? Because his heart was with Shivaji. So he comes back to Maharashtra. When he comes to Shivaji, Shivaji's ministers, they advise Shivaji, we can't take this fellow back. He's converted, he's his man now. But Shivaji says, no, I will not take your advice on this. Because even though he did that out of fear to protect his life. His heart was always with me. How will I not take him back? He takes him back. He also rejects his advice. Their advice. You understand the point? So I'm just trying to tell you examples of how these castes were by and large independent. The whole spirit was that of cooperation. Because you need passion, you need goodness, you need ignorance. You need them in the world. Somebody has to make money, somebody has to fight and protect, somebody has to think intelligently. And everybody cannot do everything. So the society is based on cooperation and independence. So the spirit was the Brahmin who was intelligent. He was always poor, traditionally. He never had much money because he was living on charity. The Kshatriya had power and these people had money. If you see, and these people basically were the skillful people. And we had extremely skillful people in India. If you remember, I think last time I mentioned also that how the British, they ensured basically that the skillful labor of India who could actually do first class handwork, they were actually Shudra only by Jati. They cut their hands and things like that just so that their Manchester business would. So the thing is, each of these castes had their Jatis, had their specific domain, you understood? Somebody is a thinker, somebody is powerful, somebody is money, somebody is skill based. But then the purpose was cooperation. And as I told you, the main spirit was on quality and work and not on birth which was considered secondary. Now I'll take you to the Mahabharata briefly. I'll try to conclude at least one thing by 12:30 so that before the others go we can finish one topic. So if you go back to the Mahabharata and you see the description of castes, you will see something interesting over there. So in fact, two characters in Mahabharata are highly controversial or less understood. One is this guy called Ekalavya and the other is Karna. And I want to speak briefly of them in connection with what we are talking today. So first thing we will take Karna. Generally people think, so Karna, what was his story? I mean, most of you know, I think other than the two of you, briefly to tell you, Karna was the son of Kunti, who by birth was a Kshatriya. But because Kunti gave birth to Karna before marriage, and you can't marry with a baby, so Kunti puts Karna in a basket and sends in the river. And Karna is adopted by one chariot driver, whose name is Adhirath. He is basically a driver. So basically that is the Shudra class. So Karna is known to the world as what? Shudra, externally. You understood? Now the interesting thing is, Karna is one of the students of Drona. Okay, now first of all let me tell you that please don't go, when you have to understand Mahabharata, don't go by television serials or any ordinary novel that talks about it. Because these people unnecessarily, they show something where Drona rejects Karna and all that. Vaisa nahi hai. Karna is actually one of Drona's students. The interesting thing is Drona taught him. Understood? See, publicly Karna was known as what? Shudra. Nobody knew he is a Kshatriya. But the thing is, society allowed him to work as a Kshatriya. You understand? He was working as a Kshatriya only. He was ruling. He was never doing his father's job of driving. Because that job did not appeal to his personality. You understood? Because in the Indian system, this Jati was primarily determined in the Gurukul. So the Gurukul system which was there, just like for example in modern times, who decides who is a PhD? Do you know how people get PhD in modern times? Only a PhD can decide. Like if you see a professor who is a PhD, he decides that now he is qualified to give PhD. You know that PhD is one degree where a lot is in the hands of the professor. He decides that you should get PhD. You understood? So similarly in the Indian system, the Gurukul which was there, they would decide what caste people are. Now if you see Karna, now the story is very important. Karna initially learns from Drona And then he decides to learn from Parashuram. He's another teacher. So he goes to Parashuram. Now what happens with Parashuram is Parashuram was a Brahmin. But then his father was killed by a Kshatriya. So he had some personal enmity. So he had decided, I will never teach Kshatriyas. उनको कभी नहीं पढ़ाऊंगा मैं. Because my father was killed by one member. So he's asking Karna, what is your, what background you come from? He said, I'm Brahmin. He lies basically. So Parashuram says, okay, fine, I believe you, I'll teach you. He teaches. After the whole teaching is over, there is a story that once Parashuram is lying on the lap of Karna, and in Karna's lap there is one big insect that crawls up, and that insect is biting his thigh, and his thigh is bleeding, but Karna is just sitting without budging. You understood? Why he does that? Because he doesn't want to disturb his teacher who is sleeping on his lap. But then when the blood falls on his face, he gets up. And when Parashuram gets up, you know what he tells Karna first? He tells him that you're a Kshatriya. You understood? He doesn't tell him that you're a Shudra. He doesn't regard that as important. He tells him that you're a Kshatriya. Because only a Kshatriya has this much passion and aggression to withstand this pain. A Brahmana does not, and even a Shudra does not. So the whole point is the caste, as I am telling you, it's primarily seen in terms of your quality. Whether you have that guts to be called as a Kshatriya. You get it? You have to have that in your system, otherwise you are not. So Parashuram tells him that you lied to me. You are not, you are actually Kshatriya only. Okay? So I am using this as an example in order to tell you what? That caste was seen in terms by the teacher in terms of the activity and the quality. Birth was considered just incidental. See, birth is incidental because even in today's world we see, right? People who are born in certain families, generally they have the characteristic of that family. Isn't that true or no? World over. Not only in India, world over. It's true. By and large you inherit the qualities of your parents genetically. You behave the same ways. That kind of profession becomes more easy. Right? Like even in America, sometimes the Jews are called as the American Marwadis. You know that? I mean, they're called as, they say there are good Jews and there are Jews. You know, so, you know, because they're generally business people. And if you know anything about American economy, some people say that the Jews may be a very small percentage of America, but they control most of the money. Right? Because they're all business people. The system is there. So the point is, birth in that way gives some facility. But activity was very important. Now let's go to Ekalavya. Very controversial story. If Drona taught Karna, why did Drona refuse Ekalavya? In fact, in today's India, the British especially made up the story without reading the Mahabharata. And unfortunately, even today's Indians hardly read it. So they just don't know what is there in the book. Where they made up a story as if Drona rejected Ekalavya because he was low caste. Actually, that's not the story. If you see the story very carefully, the story is Ekalavya belongs to a tribe in a place called Magad in India. Magad is even there today, which is Bihar. And Magad was under the subjugation of a king called Jarasandh. And Jarasandh was the #1 enemy of Hastinapur. You understood? Hastinapur was the land of the Kurus, where these people are ruling. Drona has been appointed teacher by the Kurus. You understood? I'll tell you, it is something like this. We have a National Defence Academy in India. Let us say tomorrow somebody from Pakistan, the Pakistan ISI chief's son, comes and says that I also want to learn in National Defence Academy. Please give me admission. Will you give him? No, why you don't give him? You should be equal to everybody, right? Why don't we give admission to the Pakistani ISI general's son in your National Defence Academy to learn defence? Is your enemy? His son cannot be admitted in your college. And that also defence college? How can you admit him? Already there is so much problem. You understood this? So if you see the history, Ekalavya's father was one of the members of this Magad's army, and he was part of Jarasandha's troop, which were completely opposed to Hastinapur. And Drona is the teacher of Hastinapur. How can he teach Ekalavya? He cannot. By definition, he cannot. He rejects him. He says, I cannot teach you. Forget it. So you have to read the whole story to understand. Otherwise, simply unnecessarily we think in terms of the caste equation only, which is what people have been doing, unfortunately. And again, all this credit goes to the British only, by and large, whose whole policy was to divide and rule, and they succeeded, and they are even succeeding now. You understood this? Now again the question, then why did Drona take away Ekalavya's thumb? Absolutely no question, he had to take. Because Ekalavya, what he does in the Mahabharata is, when Drona tells you cannot study from me, he cheats him and he studies. So this Ekalavya, what he does, Drona is teaching his students in one place, in a forest. Because they are shooting, right? They can't shoot in the city. They are shooting in the forest. The whole school is in the forest. So this Ekalavya, he cuts one line of trees and he sits on a tree and he's observing what teaching is going on. And he's practicing the same way. You understood? It is something like, you never got admission to a college, but you go there and from the window you are sitting and trying to learn. You can't do that. See, it's unethical, right? You didn't get admission, you can't just barge in. He does that. And then when this fellow comes to know, Dronacharya comes to know, he says that, he goes and tells him that I want you to come. And when Arjun complains to him also, Arjun's mood is basically that you had promised me something. And this fellow is doing like this. He has, hurt a dog by putting all arrows in the dog's mouth and, kind of kept it permanently paralyzed and open. So Drona understands that this fellow is going to misuse my knowledge. So he tells him that because you're going to misuse my, fundamentally give you a thumb. That's it. Story over. So this whole thing also has to be seen in several other ways other than the caste equation that people generally interpret this whole thing by. So my major point that I am trying to make in this particular section is that the four castes, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, was one system to engage the psychology in a very positive way. You understood? Your Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Give it a proper shape in a cooperative way. And in a dharmic way, in something that actually benefits society. And that's how India lived, all this while. Like if you see the Rajputs, if you see all these people in India, they lived like that. So that's why if you see the Indian system also, a war was waged by a Kshatriya only when necessary. This is a very important principle for a Kshatriya. The Indian Kshatriya, that's why India never made colonies. You understood? Who made colonies all over the world? Only European countries. Where they basically, whichever country they made colony, they completely destroyed that country. But Indian system was not colonial. Because the idea was that you just rule in your place. And if somebody is attacking you or something, then you have to defend. Right? The Rajputs and the Marathas had to fight because of aggression from the foreign rulers. So this is some very important concept in this. Any quick question on this before I wind this topic and go to the next, and we'll spare the other people who have come here. Any quick question here? Anybody has any question on this topic of castes related to the modes of nature that I'm talking? Any thought? Yeah. Yeah, so any other question on this topic? Since you have a smaller group and anybody has any other question? Another thing I wanted to say, for example, even if you see the concept of, if you see the Ramayana or the Mahabharata where it talks of how a mantri mandal is made, that means a group of ministers. It is very clear that it says that there had to be members of all castes in that mantri mandal. That means this whole concept, even in that sense of what we modern times see as reservation, which is seen in a very negative light, in some way is present over there. Where it says that there had to be, but of course the difference was, here the reservation, nowadays we talk only in the sense of the backward caste in general. But the Mahabharata and Ramayana talks about all castes having a representation in the Mantri Mandal. So for example, you will see that Dhritarashtra, in his ministers, one of his ministers is this fellow called Sanjaya. Now the Sanjaya, if you know very carefully, he's actually a Shudra. He's a Suta. You understood? He's not a Brahmin or anything. But he was considered one of the confidential group of Dhritarashtra. He only goes, for example, to try to see whether peace can be made with the Pandavas, Sanjaya. Right? He was actually the driver. But he was given that status. Similarly, Vidura also. And though he was generally understood as a Shudra, but still he was actually the Prime Minister of Dhritarashtra. Vidur, though in terms of caste, he was neither a Brahmin nor a Kshatriya, but still, in terms of his capability, he was given that particular position. All I want to say is that this Varna concept was primarily based on cooperation and also effectively using your skill set and based on independence. So every caste, the primary thing was, in every jati, was independent. Even for the Shudra, the most of the Indian Shudra jatis, if you see, they are by and large independent in their profession. Whether he is a barber or a tailor or a cobbler, whatever, blacksmith, he is independent in his existence. And independence in working is so luxurious, rather than always having to listen to somebody, like having a master above your head. So, right? So even this whole corporate culture which is there currently in India, this is of an era before that. The people by and large were all independent in their livelihood. And that actually helped them even socially to function. Okay, so this is one entire point which I wanted to speak. I'll go to the second point and I'll wrap up so that we'll complete by 1 o'clock. Yeah, so I told you I wanted to talk only about 2 applications. So please remember, what is the topic that we're doing today? The topic that we're doing today, application of the 3 modes. So one application I gave from a positive sense. I mean, this is a positive application where your jati or your contribution to society was decided based on your quality and your system. You understood? Even today actually, I mean honestly I tell you, if somebody wants to, if you go into the Indian army and if you fight etc., you need a Kshatriya spirit in some way. Even though today most fighting is automated, but still it calls for a lot of courage. I'll tell you one true story that I heard from one very close friend, something about the Indian army from recent times. It just shows the courage and that spirit. So this is a story of, like Indian army, one posting is in a place called Siachen Glacier. And if you know, this place is fully ice, right? But India is sitting there because it's of strategic importance. Otherwise, Pakistan or China would come and take over. So India is sitting over there. So in Siachen Glacier, it seems at one point of time, recently, there were these 6 soldiers who are going from one place to another. As they walk, what they do is, they have a lot of luggage on their back. And they tie their belly with rope in a line they walk. Because if one falls down, the others can catch him and kind of bring him. Right? Because you slip on the ice. So in one place, they had to climb a mountain of ice. Like this they were going, the 6 of them. So there was one crevice. Like in mountains there is a crevice where just inside. But the crevice is sometimes covered by a layer of ice. So it's not clear. So as the 6 people were walking, the first 5 went up. They didn't realize only. But when the 6th man came, the soldier, the crevice gave away. That layer of ice broke. And this fellow fell in. As he started falling in, because they were all climbing this thing, others were also being dragged down. Understood? The belly is connected by the rope. So the captain of that team, he immediately told the 5th person, cut the rope. See, it's an immediate decision you have to take. Cut the rope. Because if you don't cut the rope, what's going to happen? All 6 are going to go down. So they cut it. When they cut it, and then they wanted to see what has happened to this guy. Is it an endless hole or... When they came and saw, he was there. He was hanging some 100 meters or something down. That fellow was there. And he was like waving for help. He knew he has fallen. So they said, okay, we'll try to do something. So then they immediately, by whatever satellite phone or whatever they have, they got an army helicopter and with all cutters and with equipment to go down and save this man. After a lot of effort, the rescue team that came, they understood that this fellow cannot be saved only. Because what had happened was, he had fallen in such a way and all that ice had packed his body in such a complicated fashion that he could not be removed only. So even though these people also went down, now try to imagine, you're going into the crevice to save some man. And that's by definition dangerous. Because any time the crevice can also close. Because temperatures change over there phenomenally. So you're taking a risk of your life to save another human being. You understood? So this is all what a Kshatriya spirit is. You can see all these qualities: heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, leadership. That's what it calls for. That's the positive side of passion engaged. So these people all went down and they tried to save him. But they understood that he cannot be saved. Another problem they realized is, he will not die also easily. Because in that place there is a lot of oxygen. So, you don't die. He was like stuck till here in ice. Only head is out. He's alive. And he will not die so easily. I mean, he may die of starvation of 3-4 days. But oxygen is there. There was no shortage of oxygen in that area. Good breathing. So, I mean, this is very interesting. Leadership, talking about that. So this, the main captain of that entire rescue team, he decided to do something unconventional, which is what he had to do. He basically told him, and he also realized, he told him, "Abhi tum Bhagwan ko yaad karo, kuch nahi ho sakta tera." This captain tells him. And basically, they actually shoot him and they come back. And they come and tell their bosses back, "This is what we did." And they also say, "That's fine. It's the best thing you could have done." Because not shooting him basically means allowing him that painful death of 3 days starvation. And these people cannot stay there. Because if they stay there, there is a threat to everybody's life. Everybody will die. You understood? I mean, I'm just trying to tell you that what it actually means to be a Kshatriya in the real spirit. So it's a whole different thing actually. Or if you read the Rajput stories of the Rajput's wives, for example, when they send that Rajput husband for a war, the idea is that they put that victory tilak, and the wife tells the husband that you don't come back with the mark on your back. ऐसा भाग के आया ऐसा नहीं चाहिए. या तो जीत के आओ या वहीं शहीद हो जाओ बस. Don't come back saying that I was shot behind, I was running away from the battlefield. Because that was considered extremely low class, to run away from the battlefield. You understood? So whether the men or the women, a particular jati had that spirit very strong in their system. Like even if you see Shivaji in Maharashtra, his entire Kshatriya spirit is actually kindled by his mother. Looking at what has happened to her husband Shahaji, who is working under the Adil Shah, she actually motivates the son to be a true Kshatriya in terms of that spirit. She gives him that spirit of a Kshatriya. So it's not just about, and you see that also. I mean, today also it is said that if you see Shivaji Maharaj's talwar and all that, it is there in some museums. It's extremely difficult to lift. In Bangalore or somewhere, and even this, what is his name? Maharana Pratap. It is said this Maharana Pratap's armor, which is still present in one of the Indian museums, 250 kilogram weight it is. Now, we just cannot even imagine how this gentleman was wearing a 250 kilogram weight suit. And what was his own weight? We just don't know actually. And there's no clue to what that Kshatriya was. And then that whole story is there of the Chepak, whose one leg is broken, and it takes Maharana Pratap, up the hill to try to save his life, right? And we just don't know what was the capacity of that Chepak horse also. The horse that Chetak. You understood this? So all I'm trying to tell you is that being a Kshatriya was not an easy thing. Similarly, even a Vaishya, this farming and cow production, believe it or not, I think I mentioned to you that world over today, one major concern in food industry is the desire for organic food. सबको मालूम है कि नहीं? सुना है कि नहीं? Organic, सब लोग बोलते रहते. Organic क्या होता है? What is organic? Organic basically means food that is grown without chemicals. Then what are the chemicals used? कुछ तो fertilizer चाहिए. Something you need to protect from insects. Yeah, so natural, what is the natural fertilizer? From where does it come? Yeah, it is cow dung, cow urine. In fact, these cows and bulls were not useful in India or anywhere in the world for the milk. That was secondary or tertiary. Prime thing was the dung and the urine, because that gave fertilizer for your crops. And that actually produced organic food. This whole chemical fertilizer thing, when did it come in the modern world? After World War II. After World War II, all these chemical companies that were manufacturing ammunition, because United Nations came and they thought World War will not be there, they diverted their products to agriculture. So now you can imagine, from ammunition to agriculture. So even a Vaishya's contribution is phenomenal if you see. To actually, and that's a challenge actually in India. India, for example, today, farmers are not being valued. And that's a problem, because they are not valued and they don't produce food properly. Who's going to give you food? I mean, you can earn a lot of money through software, but then you have to fill your belly, right? Ultimately. And what to speak of skillful people? People who actually had skill with their hands. So the Indian system was basically of ensuring that craftsmen had skills using hands. And the British testify to what kind of skilled people were there here. You understood? So this whole thing is a positive contribution of the modes of nature. Now we will go to the second part. The second application of the modes of nature, which will take only 10 minutes, which is to talk about if somebody does not engage it positively, what the mind can do to you. So the first application was Varna, and the second application is states of the mind as per yoga. So this is yoga philosophy that talks of the states of the mind. This is when your Rajas Tamas is engaged negative direction. Matlab, if somebody has Rajas or Tamas in a system and it doesn't engage it positively, it will have to, that means that demon has to come out, right, in some way. So it will have to be engaged negatively. And when it comes negatively, what happens? So that we talk about the status of mind. So basically there are just 5 states which briefly we will talk in interclass. So there are 2 states for Tamas. 2 states. So basically we go one by one. So the lowest state is that of Tamas, which is called as disturbed. Disturbed means Shupta. That's a technical word used here. It basically means the mind that is constantly disturbed by external stimuli and does not know how to discriminate between what is beneficial from what is useless. You understood? That means agitation of the mind, basically disturbance of the mind, where it doesn't really understand what is beneficial, what is not beneficial. I'll just take one example and elaborate this point. All of you know in general that there are 5 senses. And we'll just take one example for each of them. The ears, the tongue, the skin and the nose. Right? These are the 5 senses that we all possess. So each sense can get disturbed by certain stimuli. So the Indian philosophy basically gives examples as well from the animal kingdom to understand which animal, for example, can get stuck up because of which sense. So does any of you know which? So I'll start with one example. Like for the eyes, we have the example of this creature called as moth. Or you know the moth? The moth is an insect that is attracted by light. So sometimes you will see that near a tube light or something or a bulb at night, sometimes there is a lot of moth that gathers around. So the problem with the moth is it is attracted to what? Light. And do you know how the moth dies? How does the moth find its death? It is by entering fire. Because fire is also light. So the moth likes to enter light. So if there is a fire, you will see that moth comes full force into it and gets burned. You understood? So moth is an example of a creature which gets distracted because of the eyes and gets caught up and burned. So like this, for each of the senses there is one example, and for the humans it is said all 5 are applicable. You could get lost because of any of them. So we'll go one by one. Ears. Do you know which animal is caught because of the ears? Which animal is caught traditionally? That means because of ears it was actually caught. Do you know which animal at least you have gone to a zoo, so you may see which animal moves its ears very carefully. Deer. Yes. A deer has very sensitive ear. So nature has given it a sensitive ear because when the tiger even little bit comes close, it immediately understands. So deer is attracted to sound. So if you know traditionally how hunters in India would catch deer, they would play a musical instrument. So the idea of playing a musical instrument was, if your hunter plays musical instrument nicely, the deer will come very close, thinking that this is my friend, because he's playing such nice music. And then when he's very close, the hunter stops the music and shoots, because that's the time to catch it. You understood? So the deer is caught mainly because of the ear. Which creature is caught because of the tongue? Which creature is caught because of the tongue? I'm asking a simple question. Come on, you all know that. In fact, snake. Who catches a snake because of the tongue? Who is caught because of the tongue? Fish. Come on. A fish is caught because of tongue, right? Have you not seen people going fishing? They go with a bait. Bait. They call it a bait, right? B-A-I-T. So the fish is caught because of the tongue. So the fish is attracted to nice taste. So when there is a food, he thinks that let me try that also. It gets caught. And the fishermen are not deep sea explorers, right? I mean, they just throw a bait and catch it out. Which animal is caught because of the skin? Who is caught because of skin? You wouldn't guess this. It's the elephant. The male elephant is considered one of the most strongest mammals. The wild male elephant. So the question is, how do they catch it? Don't you see many male elephants which are in captivity? Right? Male elephant is the big one with the tusk. The female doesn't have tusk. At least the Indian variety. So how do they catch the male elephant? So what they do is, they have a female elephant already in captivity, which they keep it tied to a tree. And in front of the female elephant, they dig a huge ditch and cover it with hay. Next morning, if there is a male elephant in the jungle, that will be lying in the ditch. Because that guy came to touch this female. Skin ka problem. Came to touch. And in the effort to touch, what happens to it? Falls in the ditch. And then these people say, now you want food, you have to dance to our tune. We don't want Arabic to come up. You understood this? So basically, that's how the elephant is caught. Otherwise, it's not. For the nose, can you give me an example? Any? Which animal? Bee. Yeah, bee. Very good. There is a particular type of bee. There is actually some bee. Actually, if you notice, bees are actually very powerful in terms of how they can dig holes. But the bee's attraction basically is the scent of the honey. And there is some flowers actually that, I forgot the name of that, but they close in the evening. So when this bee sits on that, it loses track of the time. And it is so lost in the smell of the honey, when the flower closes, it cannot come out. Normally it has the power to come out. Normally it has the power to make a hole in tree. But when it is lost to the smell, it loses that power. It becomes very weak. And it dies there. Interesting, right? So in human civilization, all are applicable, if you see carefully. That people fall prey to everything, right? I mean, like if you see today in India, if you read this whole Punjab elections that is coming up, one whole agenda is the drug abuse. Right? Very big thing, all that movie that came up also recently. Kya naam tha uska? Udta Punjab, yeah. So, Udta as in high on drugs. Okay, so drug addiction extremely challenging. I mean, a person is lost because of that. Skill, if you see, the lady who is currently fighting American election, Hillary Clinton, uska husband, you guys may not know, his name was Bill Clinton. He was the president from 1991 to 97 or 98. And when he was in the White House, there was this girl, Monica Lewinsky. He had an affair with her and it became, America mein to bahut log affair karte hain. Lekin because he was president, he had to apologize in the White House, in front of the Congress, in front of his wife and daughters. He had to say that, I'm sorry, I did this. You understood? It's quite a shame for a big man to do that. Even, in fact, in recent times, there was this very famous golfer, American, his name was Tiger Woods. A very famous guy actually, in golf. So this fellow also, sometime in 2008 or something, in fact, see in America, he was respected for integrity. And Accenture and many companies had Tiger Woods as their brand ambassador for integrity. Matlab, integrity and values. So when it came out that he had all these affairs, he lost everything. His wife divorced him, he lost his kids, he lost all his sponsors. He just, you understood? He just managed into, he kind of really, you understood what I'm saying, right? That means each of the sense has a potential to completely destroy a man. And that's what the yoga philosophy is talking here. Kshipta. If the senses are too disturbed by the external stimuli, you can just get lost. And that's the effect of tamas. That means there's a negative side of it. When you don't be careful what it could do to you. That's what it stands for. Of course, the other things I don't give such a big lecture. Another characteristic of tamas for the mind is stupefied state of the mind, which is called Buddha, which basically is characterized by inertia. Like sometimes we feel very lethargic in our mind, mentally you feel very lethargic in terms of just want to sleep and don't want to do anything. कुछ नहीं करना है मुझे आज, that kind of a thing. काय करायचं, फक्त झोपायचं, that thought process. That's actually stupefied mind. In this mind, the mind is sluggish, loses capacity to think, becomes negative and dull. That's again tamasic, and that's considered a negative after effect of the mind. The third state is a characteristic of rajas, passion, where vikshipta, restless mind. You know what's a restless mind, right? Where the mind runs from one object to another but never stays anywhere consistently. So that's a negative side of passion, where you are too agitated and you cannot concentrate on any activity. This is one major challenge in the modern world. Like in our cities, there are many, if you talk to any psychologist, psychiatrist, they say many youngsters suffer this problem of disturbed mind in terms of being very restless. Now then the yoga says that there are two more states which is achieved only by yoga to actually bring the mind to sattva. So basically, even if one was a kshatriya, so please remember, first of all, when I told earlier in the varna that a kshatriya's passion, it doesn't mean that he has no goodness. That's not what it means. He has sattva. It is just that his prominent characteristic is that means he has positively channelized that passion. And he has goodness also in his system. You get that point, right? So like that. So goodness was important for everybody. And even ignorance is also needed for everyone, as I told you last time. Without ignorance, you cannot sleep. Without tamas, you cannot actually switch off the system. So, one-pointed ekagra, as it calls, it is conducive to concentration and the aim of the yoga. Now, this I am going to elaborate when I come to yoga philosophy. That is in my 10th lecture. When I talk about yoga, I will be talking about the purpose of yoga is to, the pranayama which is there in yoga is not only for the breath, it is for the mind. See, the Indian system, the pranayama and asana, these two things which are there, the pranayama is for the mind and asana is for the body. So pranayama and asana combined together keeps you mentally and physically fit. That's the idea. So ekagrata or one-pointedness, which is the goal of the yoga system, is a state of sattva. And the final state of sattva is well-controlled, where the consciousness reflects purity. And so this is basically related to moksha and so on. So this is like a little more advanced state of sattva. I'll talk on this in more greater detail when I come to that part of yoga. There I'll be talking on these two states. But at this point I will not talk more on this particular view. Okay, so with this we end our session today. As I promised you, I'll finish by 1 o'clock. So we are done with today. Just compress this a little bit. So the whole session today, to recap, was about how, so if I go back to my first slide a minute, the whole goal was we had these two applications that we wanted to talk. The first application was the 3 types of natures in Varna, and the second part was on the mind, the impact on free will and conditioning. You understood? That means what I was trying to speak of is when the mind is too much influenced by the negative impact of passion and ignorance, then one loses one's free will. That means one becomes very addicted and conditioned to negative energy, and that basically completely destroys his personality. And that's what we are actually talking about, which is something very practically seen in the world today, where, I mean, just when I told about Punjab, I had just before coming, I was just reading my news. There was some group of drug addicts in Punjab, it seems yesterday, they raped and murdered 100-year-old woman in Punjab. I mean, I was like stunned to read that. How could they do that to a 100-year-old lady? She's like a great grandmother of some children. And these drug addicts were completely in some crazed state. They raped and killed this woman. So this was like today's news in the morning. So basically, it's like a terrific after effect of a lot of tamas, where you have no discrimination in terms of what you do in the world. You just act completely insane and crazy. So basically, such a person loses his free will, and he is completely mad in the sense of what we understand, right? Any quick question or comment before I wind up? Anybody has anything to ask? Yeah, I think many of you want to rush. Hey, this t-shirts, nobody gave that. Your CR told me that you're going to do that, but everybody has gone away already.